Oh, there it is. It reminds me of the prey we were facing on, doesn't it? Cold Blood, Fate of Fables by Bill Kiefer. The ritual scene in the book Shepherd. Yes. I wonder who you are, specimen. Come, take a closer look at this thing. Isn't it fascinating? Wow. While this part of the hunt may continue on, the rest of our hunt, the rest of our play remains to be finished. But it will be finished tonight. So let's go back and finish off our prey.
Evening, Storyhunters. Glad to see that you've returned. I see that there are visitors here. I am Lord Red, Alpha of this pack, and I want to invite you to join us and be part of the hunt, to help preserve and restore our hunting grounds. We hunt down prey of various types, from many different genres and breeds. The prey for tonight is called Shepherd, a short story within the Cold Blood Fate of Fables by Bill Kiefer. A 6-piece meal. We have already began feasting, and now we are about to finish it. I encourage you to review past segments of us consuming this prey and get a feel as to what we are about. To recap, that starts from the beginning. After Shepherd accepted the case from his former lover, Lynn, to rescue her son Blake from the hand of the cultists, the Illuminati Arcana, that believed in a fictitious beast called the Black Dog. Shepherd interrogated Nanol, who told him that the Illuminati Arcana had taken him to a warehouse where Shepherd found that Blake was about to be sacrificed in a ritual to cleanse him of the dog. Shortly after rescuing Blake, Shepherd is confronted by Reverend X, who retrieved the boy to restart the ritual. After taking down Reverend X, Shepherd was at a threshold. Should he rescue the boy, or should he abandon him to his fate? He chose to rescue him. Now, as we go over this final parts of this story, feel free to give us insights, corrections, and critiques that would help Mr. Kiefer and other story hunters so that their hunts can be exciting and successful. Now let's finish our prey. He looked at his hands. The coat had fallen away somewhere and the only woolen belt had remained. That was fine. That was all he needed. Shepherd clambered atop the railing like an avid schoolchild, although he didn't have the bird-like feet to anchor him as securely. He needed leverage, and there is no safe way to do this. As the cultists came down, Shepherd saw that it was a stoat. They like recruiting all kinds, don't they? The pale cultist looked everywhere as he descended, but behind him. Shepherd leapt forward when the cultist looked up. The belt, still wet from his accidental baptism earlier, went over his victim's muzzle swiftly and landed against his thick, furry neck with a slap. He was startled and grabbed at his neck with his right arm. Shepherd squatted and allowed himself to fall back a little, letting the cultist support his weight with his fragile neck. Then, when Shepherd was at a 45-degree angle to the floor, he pushed his leg straight with all his might and yanked the musclet off ladder. The belt came undone as Shepherd hit the floor, but it had done the trick. The unbalanced cultist had cracked his ribs into the railing and tumbled into a heap head first, nearly on top of Shepard. His legs and thick tail fell between the railings, and his lower half began to obey gravity, while the cultist tried to shake the stars out of his eyes. Shepard got to his feet as the other man scratched uselessly at the slick floor. He was trying to call for help, but the stoats couldn't gather enough air to cry out. The black Kazakh blossomed around the slender man until his body had twisted to jam himself just under his arms, stopping his fall.
"You moron! You're only on the second floor!"
Shepard spat and then leaned on the railing. With casual deliberateness, he lifted his right leg and then brought his heel down on the base of the cultist's triangular head. He repeated this until he felt things crack under his foot, and he could smell that the body had voided itself. "You should have taken the fall to get away from me," but the advice fell on deaf ears. Shepard's ears turned and twitched, hoping to hear pious cursing, or even gunshots, anything to indicate that Diego had arrived. Nothing but the growling and sobbing of a little lost pup. It worried him that Reverend X might have been right, that the local precinct was riddled with his friends. But he refused to allow himself to dwell on that. He wasn't dead yet, and the boy still had some fight in him. His head spun a bit as he bent over and grabbed the bloody cassock by the hood and sleeves. Shepard walked backwards until the garment was off the body. The stoat had a palm-sized ceremonial knife on him, but no gun. Shepard cursed softly. Even he was getting a little tired of doing this the hard way. He smeared blood on his face and hands. There was no avoiding it, as he put things over his head, then using the dead body as a step. The detective climbed over the railing and onto the ladder. Both knees shrieked in protest, but he made his way down, one run at a time, with a knife in his belt and the rope trying to get in his way. Somehow he managed to drop down to the hard floor. Shepard traced his steps back, stumbling in the dark. There was no point in trying to be quiet. He was going to have to serve as his own distraction. He allowed himself to pant, almost forcing himself to hyperventilate until he became staggeringly dizzy. He allowed himself to stagger and to put his bloodied hands in front of his face. The smell of copper made him as nauseous as a rookie. Shepard found himself hacking and retching as his stomach attempted to rebel for the first time in years. He heard splashing and there were dancing lights suddenly on him, even before he reached the edge of the giant baptismal. He waved the bloodied hand upwards in answer to the rough voices. "There! They're in the waterworks! Up the ladder! I got one of them, I think!" Shepard didn't plan to fake a collapse. His knees just went out from under him. Rough hands grabbed at him, and he tried to fight them off without thinking, but he was too weak to them any real harm. They steered him to the edge of the basin and sat him down, asking if it was the police. He grabbed his snout, channeling the cat from the interview room.
"I couldn't do nothing. I couldn't do nothing."
They suddenly realized that Reverend X was taking too long. Shepard could feel the spark of fear went through all of them. The cultists didn't break. You had to give them that. Orders were snapped, pairs to all the stairwells. The rhino up the ladder, and they left Shepard and Brother Maiden, who was some sort of parrot. Shepard got up, and the airvice started wiping in his face with a red rag. Shepard shook him off, but the cultist wasn't having none of it. So the Alsatian allowed the steward bar to dip the wad of cloth in the water and rub at his muzzles and forehead. He let his hands down and gathered all the cold rage he had put down. He felt his spine straightened as he watched the airvice face mere inches away as the water and elbow grease revealed the dog beneath the blood and gore. A dog that he did not know. The second the airvice pupils froze, Shepard slammed his knife into the parrot's chest. Hollow ribs snapped with ease. A short whistling squawk escaped his beak, and Shepard pushed the cultist into the pool. He stepped into the water and held the airvice under for a few moments. There wasn't much thrashing about, but Shepard wanted to be sure. He needed a breather anyway. No rest for the wicked. He searched the corpse for a gun, but he came up short. He was alone now, and for a moment Shepard could not remember what he was doing. He cannot remember what he came for.
What kind of monster are you?
Cousin's voice came to him around the roar in his ears. Lynn's big wet eyes and swept back ears hovered in the darkness, begging him to do something, pleading. Briefly, he felt a strange and unfamiliar sensation. Guilt.
Never punch a bird. Never, ever punch a bird.
Shepard grunted. His mother's voice always chose the wrong time to haunt him. Well, the joke's on you, Mom. Shepard forced himself back on his feet and sloshed through the water. He barely spared the water wheel a glance. The pool had continued to drain with the water off. Shepard found his gun and he picked it. Or he tried to. It would probably still work, possibly. His hands had to be convinced that the effort was worth opening up. His knees weren't helping in the least. Shepard started to hear the shouting of the other cultists. The open-air warehouse that the sound carried down from all the floors. His flickering ears convinced his hand that he had to pick up the damn gun.
Right now! Damn it!
Sooner or later, someone was going to look up over the railing and see. Shepard looked behind him at the wheel, his mind catching up again.
Any moment now!
He forced himself to complete the thought.
Someone is going to look over the railing and see that I freed the boy Blake, Blackie, whatever the hell his name is.
Shepard limped and splashed 5 or 6 feet across the pool until he was at the inverted boy's side once more. One eye seemed swollen and there were a few chunks of fur ripped off his neck and body. He had put up a fight, and that made Shepard smile, however briefly. The cloth muzzle had been found and stuck over the boy's snout, but it didn't stop him from trying to take a bite out of the assassin. Shepard pulled his hood down and pushed the wet gun into the boy's restrained right hand.
Don't drop that,
the cop said firmly, but softly. He needed both throbbing hands to loosen the cuffs and straps that held Lynn's boy to the wheel. There was only a second between a sharp shout and 3 echoing pops that told him they were on the wrong end of a shooting gallery. Instinctively, Shepard covered the boy and closed his eyes.
I'm sorry, Lynn.
Then there was a terrible blast that startled him right out of his fear. Shepard stepped back, eyes wide open. There was the boy, bent half upright, arm extended with its swollen eyes shut, and smoke from the gun moving slowly up from the revolver. The warehouse was swallowed in an echoing silence for the next 2 or 3 seconds as the boy's open eyes followed the path of something heading down, until the all too clear sound of a body slapping against the concrete warehouse floor. The black dog smiled and its tail swept a wag between the strapped legs that still held it mounted on the wheel. Gunfire made the most excellent alarm clock. For the first time since the wheel had thrown him across the pool, Shepard found a short enough burst of adrenaline to overcome his pain. He stopped pulling at straps on the boy's feet, and the boy grabbed at his ropes. More bullets came their way, crashing into the wheel, and the boy returned to with the calm deliberation Shepard might have seen on the soldier's face. Each shot from the revolver either hit his mark or came close enough to give him courage. Shepard didn't care. The wolf dog's freakish feet soon wiggled out the straps, and then they were free to run from the pool and out of the circle of torches and candles. He picked up Blake when he realized that he wasn't going to fall down. Shepard knew he paid for it later, but the boy seemed to have trouble running in water on his carelessly long feet. He saw black-clad figures with flashlights coming out of stairwell, and Shepard headed for the rows of crates he barely made out in the darkness at the back of the warehouse. Blake shot over Shepard's shoulder as a cone of lights pinned them against tarp-covered crates. The lights vanished with a curse, and Blake gave a victory howl, or what the pup could muster as he bounced around in Shepard's arms. The dark places of the warehouse forced him to slow, as suddenly as adrenaline had revived him. The shadows seemed to suck the life out of him. He could hear sound of covered feet running around the crates near. They were close enough that they'd hear his panting sooner or later. "Get onto the tarp," he ordered. "Stay quiet." He let the boy keep the gun. As a cop, he had instinctively counted the bullets. The revolver was as empty as a bag of jewels between his legs. The boy did as he was told, earning a good boy, the highest honor Shepard had ever given a child. He took out his knife. His hand clutched it like it was the last thing he'd ever feel in his hand for the rest of his life, as it very much might be. Heavy clunks of switches being thrown sized into the darkness. The nights began to come up in the warehouse. Most of the bulbs were dead, but in steps the cultists pushed back the darkness until it no looked like an abandoned warehouse. The narrow aisle lit up and Shepard found himself in a row of automobiles and trucks, some covered with tarps, some not. He growled in spite of himself at the single bulb fixture that hung directly over his head, a head that stood in plain view over the bonnet on a fancy Packard. He ducked down and moved into the shadow of a larger truck. The ceiling was lower in his section of the warehouse, so there was that at least, less vulnerable from the hooded men on a different floor. Some of the men near the wheel could be seen hurriedly putting out the candles and torches. Shepard damned himself for not knocking any as he ran away. His damn fuzzy-headedness had forgotten that ice houses went up like a gasoline-soaked rag, but there was no exit visible in the parking section but one of those new steel roll-up doors. The padlock crimping the chains together against the wall was visible from where Shepard hung in shadow. But the boy, going out in a little blaze of glory, would not get Lynn her child back. Shepard forced himself to think past the roaring in his ears. The boy firing over his shoulders had either deafened him, or he was learning what a concussion felt like, or both. By now, the nut jobs must have found Reverend X, and that would be enough to cause some members to rabbit it. A few true believers would want to hunt him down for some holy revenge plan. He could hide himself easily in and among the vehicles for hours, not enough for the boys to arrive, but they might find the boy first, and his knees vetoed the idea of crawling around. A fox in the robe ran by, giving the road only a quick glance. In a moment, however, he called out and poked his red head back into the aisle. The rhino jogged up behind the fox as Shepard stepped out into the middle of the aisle. Shepard smiled and waved the knife with a bravado that usually served him well. The rhino smiled at the invitation and took off his robe. The white-gray chest rippled like a circus strongman as he wrapped a cloak around his right hand. A rhino's knuckles were unique among the worms of New Amsterdam, and they were one of the rarest mammals in the United Independent States. The rhino was intending to beat him to death, and was willing to take his time doing it. Shepard could respect that. Shepard saw it coming, but it wasn't the punch he was expecting. The rhino's mitt snatched the knife right out of his hand. The dog stumbled on trembling knees as the rhino punched him with the other hand just behind his right ear.
You're not worthy of touching this knife, Shepard.
The rhino gave the knife to the fox.
You've released this black dog, this walking death, into the world ill-prepared for it. I know in your heart you believe yourself a good man, but you have always been blind to the truth, fixated on the laws of man. I forgive you for that. But will that child? You've condemned him to a life without satisfaction, without peace, without love.
Shepard leaned on the truck as the rhino mocked him. The rhino may well have been describing the dog's own life, with one important difference, and he chuckled with dark humor. You've not met his mother, bub. He pushed himself away from the truck and stood a tower of pain held together with spite and fury, but also with little satisfaction. With a piece of knowing he'd done his best, and the memory of a love that had never faded, no matter how deeply he buried it. His mother. Shepard suddenly lost his thread. His head whistled like a teapot, and the dog fell to his knees. The pain woke him up. The fox stepped forward with a knife. The rhino said something, crossing his palms into an X over his heart, praying. I guess he decided it was okay if the knife touched me. A single gunshot caught to the rhino in the eye. His bear faltered, and his head shook and trembled as a lead bounced and rattled in his thick skull. Nonsense syllables spilled out of his gray mouth as the huge man slowly crumbled to the floor. The fox had turned to watch the spectacle of the rhino's death dance stunned the slender red man, who stood there frozen, holding the glittering ceremonial knife the wrong way. Shepard grabbed the cloak, and even though his grip was weak, he still managed to pull the vulpine to him. He still managed to slam his canine forehead into the hilt of the knife, into the furry white blaze of the other man's neck. It wasn't a killing blow, but it was enough to spook the fox into running off as Shepard put his mitt on the knife. The coward hadn't even stopped long enough to see that the dog couldn't open his hand to grab it.
Typical fox.
Shepard turned on all fours and looked down the aisle to the tarpaulin when he hid in Blake, the smoking black hole in the dusty canvas. He crawled to the hiding spot, and the little wolf dog didn't move until Shepard lifted up the edge. Then he moved quickly, hugging Shepard with his freakishly long black arms until he was choking and coughing.
That's my boy, Shepard whispered. That's my boy.
The whistling made his ears jerk, and Shepard realized that the noise wasn't just in his head. His fingers and hands were numbly dead to him.
Puppy, now I need you to reach under my shirt and grab. No, not the wheel. The other thing. Put it to my lips.
Shepard blew the whistle 6 times before Diego was at his side. He wanted to make a crack about the mutt's timing, but by then he was too winded to do anything but pass out. Shepard! The detective jerked awake, realizing that someone was pulling Lynn's child from his arms. He yanked the child back and grabbed at his holster, or at least where it had been. He glared at the white fuzzy face of the Highlander Terrier rookie. Everything hurt, and his fingers wouldn't open. His joints were wielded in place and throbbed in time with his exhausted heart.
Lucky? Where's Diego?
The Highlander looked hesitant, but he answered quickly enough.
Some of the boys from the past turned up. He's talking to them now.
Shepard just nodded. Just this once, he had no time for the spotlight of public adoration. The shorter dog seemed relieved.
We need to get you to the ambulance. You've got some serious damage.
No, get me to my car. We've got to get this boy home to his mother. Lucky protested, but Shepard persisted, and then eventually the rookie caved, if only because he was afraid of what would happen if he let Shepard collapse in front of the press. As it was, a feline photographer had staked out Shepard's forte and got a picture of the crying wolf dog wrapped in Diego's jacket while clinging to the bloody station. Shepard glared, his ears back, unflappable. The photographer tried to get a comment from the detective, but Shepard looked at the terrier and told him to shoot the cat if he didn't get away from him. The rookie made it a point to unholster his weapon. Shepard ended up in his passenger seat only because his fingers were too stiff to get around the handle of the car door. As he drove away, Shepard turned to Lucky.
Why are the boys from the press here?
The terrier frowned as he struggled to find the right gear.
Diego had a little trouble getting local hosts to turn on the word over for Lizard, so he told Paige that the albino fiend was held up inside that warehouse. I take it there was at least one Stilton there?
Yes, there was half an arc in there.
Does he at least have pink or red eyes?
Shepard recalled leaning on the railing and slamming his heel repeatedly on the fallen man's head. He smiled fondly at the thought.
Not anymore.
The rookie sputtered for a moment and then frowned, torn between laughter and cursing. Shepard held the boy close to his chest as they both began to drift off. Despite the Highlander's repeated attempts to find the right gear, during the ride, Lucky would occasionally wake Shepard up for no other reason than to make sure he was still alive.
Lucky, stop. Let me sleep. It's not healthy.
The smaller dog snapped back.
My name's not Lucky. It's Lucky. Officer Lucky McDonald.
Shepard smiled in the dark.
Okay, don't get short with me.
The terrier gave the detective some serious side-eye.
Faith, a joke out of me. Now I know I've got to get you to the hospital first.
My house. Shepard growled. His ears still whistled and every inch of him hurt. He was not looking forward to discussing this with Waldo, but Lynn would be happy and the Arcana had its nutsack cut off. That would have to be enough. His numbed fist rubbed at the furry black heading on his chest.
He's a black dog. The incarnation of death. Death is going to follow him everywhere. You release this black dog, this walking death, into the world to prepare for it. I know in your heart you believe yourself a good man, but you have always been blind to the truth, fixated on the laws of man, forgiven. But will that child, you condemn him to life without satisfaction, without peace, without love.
He kissed the small black head between oversized ears. The boy started then. Where are we? We're in Brooklyn. The boy seemed satisfied. With that, snuggled into his chest. Brooklyn. He muttered like it was a magical place. A magical word. That made Shepard smile some more. He allowed himself to pretend this is what it felt like to be a father. Somewhere under all the pain, it felt rather nice. Shepard thought briefly about the way the boy handled his gun. He was a natural. Big Blackie must have taught him a bit when Lynn wasn't looking. Waldo had been a natural in his day before he went straight. That made him smile too, thinking that the big bad wolf might have also had a soft spot for Lynn's bastard child. Waldo would have the rest of his life to pretend to be the boy's father. Shepard would only have a few more minutes.
Just this moment, MacDonald. I feel lucky,
he whispered it. The boy began licking the blood off his shirt. The lazy, casual licking of a sleeping pup who hadn't eaten in hours.
He has a taste for blood,
Shepard thought.
At least he won't grow up to be a pansy like his real father. He's hard. He's strong.
The thought made him warm. And what if they were right? What if he was death incarnate? Shepard smiled, a feeling of immense satisfaction washing over them.
There were a lot of people that needed killing.
That was a delicious ending. Despite there being shortcomings, this prey did not disappoint to satisfy. A positive resolution to fully complete Shepard's character development. We had watched an Alsatian develop from a cold, hard careerman to a soft, gentle father figure. I did have some problems chewing through some of the sentence structures. There was a particular moment where a sentence got clunky and difficult. However, what happened next made the payoff that much better, so it redeemed it. When writing a story, pay attention to the words you used. We take it for granted when we speak that people would understand us. In prose, it's different. Some of the words you use daily and phrase you say often may come unclear when it is presented on page. If you misspell or misplace a word or comma, or put too many words in one sentence, the meaning of your structure may be interpreted differently. This may cause the consumer to be taken out of the experience of your prey. To remedy this problem, be sure to proofread and also keep someone close to help. They can help you find a word, punctuation, or grammar and will assist you in your weak areas. Now that we are finished with Shepard, let's review and analyze what we consumed. Again, to remind you, if there are errors you found or something you want to bring up, share it with us. This will help Mr. Kiefer and story hunters like yourself into improving your talents in your next hunt. Let's divide this into 5 different sections: plot, character, world building, dialogue, and structure. Plot was engaging. Though there was some minor hiccups along the way, it began with a great hook that led into Shepard's hero's journey. From beginning, middle, and end, it had plenty of conflict and resolution that delivered a good theme about family and honor. He experienced plenty of developments that kept us engaged. To capitalize this, we will use a familiar diagram within the entertainment industry called the hero's journey. I advise you to go over the diagram on your own time and do some research into how to implement this when beginning your prey. Keep in mind that it is not law, but a guidance. We encourage you to learn what these parts are and how to use them. Then from there, you may use them in however way you want. However, remember, there must always be a beginning, middle, and end. There must be conflict and resolution, and it must be entertaining. Now let's go over Shepard's hero's journey. Number 1, the ordinary world. This is Shepard's career and status. Then his hero's journey goes on to Call to Adventure. This is Rex's call and Lynn's request. The refusal of the call. Shepard's inner turmoil about the pact he, Blake's dad, and Rex made concerning the cult and Blake himself, meeting the Herald. This is Rex's resolve and rebuttal to drive Shepard into accepting the quest. Crossing the threshold. This is the part where Shepard and his partner meets under the bridge. Test allies, enemies. This is finding the informant, Jesus, interrogating him, and coming to terms with his own age. The next step is approach the innermost cave, entering the warehouse. Next part is the ordeal, his fight with the cat. Next is the reward, Shepard's rescue of Blake. Next step is the roadblock. This is the part where Reverend X confronts Shepard and retrieves Blake. Next part is resurrection, saving Blake and sacrificing his life for him. Turning with the elixir. Shepard's return with Blake. So as you can see with the hero's journey, we can follow Shepard's life and how he develops and within the story and himself. This is a perfect segue into the next section, character. There was plenty of characters here who fulfill their specific roles in not only delivering a believable world with characters of various species engaging each other in their own social interactions, from stereotypes to relatable characters. As for development, there were quite a few, but we'll focus on Shepard. As mentioned, he was a career man who was complex and over time became a simplified individual. There were key moments in the story where his character made a shift, and each of these parts focused around a specific character, Blake. When he accepted the case, he did it for Lynn, and then after rescuing Blake, he continued the case for him. And lastly, when he is tempted to leave Blake to his fate, he chose to finish a case for himself. Each of these key moments helped him from a tough and stubborn man to a raw and exposed father figure. There are 3 key moments I would like to highlight. Cook, my baby. Remember, this was the point of Shepard's life when he had finished off the cat. He was about to make a joke about it, but then he repeated something Lynn said to him. They took my baby. This was a moment where the thought of his career started to fade into the background, and he began thinking about the perspective of a what if. What if Blake was his son? He had the thought that if things were different, Blake could have been his son. This then turned from a case for Lynn and extended it for the sake of Blake. His wife wanted another child so bad, and I gave her that child she wanted. Blake is my son, not Big Blackie's. This was another pivotal moment in Shepard's development. Remember what happened after this? Reverend almost believed him. This was such a convincing lie that I believe that Shepard had almost convinced himself. Career was no longer on his mind, but the safety of Blake. Not only that, we seen Shepard begin to see Blake as a son. Waldo would have the rest of his life to pretend to be the boy's father. Shepard would only have a few more minutes. Just this moment, McDonald, I feel lucky. Then at that ending of the story, we get a closer look at his vulnerable state, where he knew that Blake would soon return to Lynn and his father. He had wanted more than anything was to be a father. The best thing Lynn could have done for Shepard was to give him an experience of being a father. From the start of the introduction to the end, he respected and was proud of Blake. Before this, Shepard had believed that being a father was no longer possible, but this night, Lynn gave him that experience. The world building was fascinating and interesting and intriguing, copying many of the stories that we have known before, from movies such as Zootopia to anime series known as Beastars. The world building of this takes on a place in New Amsterdam, in a world that is known as a SOP, which are full of anthropomorphic creatures, quite like us, who have their own society, their own culture, and their own belief. They have their own politics and so on. I encourage you to at least read the beginning of the book where it says, "Welcome to Aesop." It explains the world in a lot more way than I could possibly do here. And I encourage you to read the rest of the book, because it goes into the world more in depth, and you will find it intriguing and interesting as you go on. This dialogue section can be delivered in a first-person perspective, but it was delivered in a close third-person perspective. With the story focused on Shepard, we get his thoughts and development, what he is saying, and both verbal and non-verbal, with thoughts and deeds felt real. Lastly, their structure. A story structure can make the difference between a well-thought-out story and something else. Depending on the choice of the creator, a structure is essential, and it all pivots on how well it is executed. You could have the best characters, the best stories, an engaging dialogue, and immense immersive world building. If your structure is less than mediocre, it will not do well. This is the backbone of every story. With that being said, when it comes to a structure, a few things within Shepard needs to be highlighted. One of the most problems I have noticed was perhaps a few missing dialogue tags, and sometimes some characters share same paragraphs. Missing dialogue tags is a simple enough mistake. Dialogue tags usually serve as to help us know who's talking and whose turn it is. Usually it's broken up into different paragraphs. Now the second problem is misplaced or misspelled words. In many instances within a story where a wrong word stands out and makes it difficult to chew. Third part is confusing descriptions. At one instance where the shepherd was talking with the earth sign outside the warehouse, he used the phrase "Jan." At the moment I was confused with this description. That was the bear's description. In reality, Shepherd was referring to himself. These were the main structure errors that created unchewable fats in your prey. Remember to proofread your material, and don't be afraid to rewrite. This concludes the story. I hope you all had fun and learned a lot. It was a pleasure to share this prey with all of you, to study it and to train ourselves to be better at our next hunts. To Kiefer, keep going on your hunts and continue to share with us your prey. I encourage you all to purchase this book and feast on the rest of the portions of this prey. If there's anything you want to add, share it with the pack, so we can learn together and adapt our skills. If there's anything in these sessions that you want me to improve on, let me know. I want this to be fun and engaging experience for all of you. Don't be shy, we're all in this together. If you like what we do here, join our pack. Share with us your stories and request a story for us to share with all of you. See you again next time. And remember, be ready to hunt when you hear our howl.